All right, we came out of exec session, took a tiny break, and now it's 6:33 and we are reconvening. We are headed into public comment. First up, we have introductions of new administrators. There are going to be a few at this meeting and then a couple more at our September 14th meeting. So I'll turn it over to all of you to introduce them.
Great, thank you. I'm up first for an introduction. I'd like to welcome up Julia Bamba, who has recently stepped out of the Gibson Eck principal role. We'll just give you welcome into a principal on special assignment position to focus on secondary innovation. And Julia has led a lot of the innovation work within our district for student learning and experiences and served as a founding and ongoing principal until recently. She has also served in our district in many different capacities in a comprehensive high school. And just a little bit more about her, she focuses on spending time both on sort of healthy living, fitness, eating, all the things associated with that, and hanging out with her husband and two boys. You can often find the Bamba family on the ski slope, soccer field, or on the trails somewhere here in the Pacific Northwest. And yeah, the different positions she served in has been assistant principal, activities director, language arts teacher, soccer, basketball, and track coach. And beyond Issaquah, she's also worked in Federal Way Public School. So welcome, Julia, to the position. And if you want to share a few words, feel free to share.
I was going to maybe not share because then I have to set other people up. So just, just being in this role for a month, it's been really exciting to get back to the work of researching and thinking about our, not just as a small school, but our entire system. So I just appreciate the opportunity to have this role and to be able to transition and stay in the district and just have a new challenge ahead. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Welcome.
Good evening. Okay, I'm very excited to introduce our new Director of Payroll and Benefits, Heather Duane. Yes, she attended the University of Washington and had a career as a media buyer for advertising firms in LA. After staying home with her children when they were little, she started working at Skyline High School about 8 years ago. And since then, she's worked in special services, human resources, and payroll. She loves payroll so much that she initially took a pay reduction to work in payroll. So she really loves payroll. Her 3 children graduated from Skyline High School and are attending Montana State University, Texas Christian University, and Washington State University.
Thank you. Well, I am excited and honored to be in this position and to serve the district in this way. Our payroll department works very hard to be accurate and timely, so everyone gets paid. Everyone loves payday. So just happy to help in that way. So thank you.
Right, our next introduction is Cindy Xinyu Feng. She is leading our accounting department as the controller. She joined the district in 2021 and worked in the TLS, payroll, and accounting departments. Prior to joining ISD, she worked in assurance at Ernst & Young and banking at JP Morgan Chase. She has a bachelor's in accounting from Penn State and a master's in finance from Case Western Reserve University with Beta Gamma Sigma honors and the Dean's Award as the Outstanding Student of the Year. Cindy has a passion for improving practices of increased efficiency, as well as enforcing internal controls and ensuring compliance.
Thank you, Mariah, for the introduction. I'm very excited to join our district for the role and are also very excited to lead potential changes to better serve our community and our school district. I'm very passionate about numbers and financial reporting analysis to make it better serve our community. And thank you.
Hello, thank you for letting me be here. I'm Sherry Cox, Executive Director of Secondary Education here in the Issaquah School District, and I have the pleasure this evening of introducing two amazing humans. First, Jennifer Johnson is originally from the Pacific Northwest, recently coming to Issaquah from 22 years supporting students and learning in the Bellevue School District. She began her career teaching middle school Spanish, PE, and health, and middle school, like me, is her passion. And she spent most of her time at this level. For the last 8 years, she served as the assistant principal in two different Bellevue schools. She looks forward to engaging in the great work that's already happening at Cougar Mountain Middle School and looks to strengthening the connections of the community to the school. Jennifer is also a parent of two students in the Issaquah School District, and her husband is a teacher here as well. She didn't disclose this in the interview process, but I recently learned she is also a Swiftie. I'm excited to welcome Jennifer to the CMMS team.
Thank you so much. My kids loved the Taylor Swift concert this summer. So I have spent the last few days working with Principal McKee to get to know the staff at Cougar Mountain Middle School and welcome in some new 6th grade families. And there's a lot of energy there. So I'm very excited to join the team. Thank you.
And as you learned, Julia has left her, I think it might be her second home. But thankfully we have Tanya Reichel is starting her 23rd year in the Issaquah School District and is now the new principal at Gibson-Ack. She's taught English for 15 years at Liberty. And in the fall of 2015, when Julia came to Liberty to share the vision of the new school, she couldn't wait to get there. Tanya knew immediately she wanted to be part of the vision. She served on the Gibson-Ack planning team and then an advisor when the school opened in fall of 2016. In 2018, she became the Dean of Students, focusing on the details of turning the vision for a personalized real-world learning into daily reality. She's excited to continue the innovative work and will focus on building partnerships with all families and elevating the amazing work of our students. She's lived in this community for 23 years, and when she's not at Gibson-Ack, she also enjoys time biking, hiking, and running in the mountains, or paddling, rowing, sailing on the water with her dog and her husband. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Gibson-Ack is also my second home. And so I've been there a long time with an amazing community and families and students and staff. And so I'm just very honored to be the principal. Thank you.
Well, welcome to all of the new staff. It's very exciting and we're all looking forward to a really wonderful start to a new school year. So thank you. All right. All good? Oh, look who's here. All right. Well, then we will make the transition as our president has just arrived.
Awesome. Excited to see new administrators joining us. Apologies for my delay. Next, we will go to, there's so much here, so much scrolling. Next, we will move to public comments, an opportunity for the board to receive public statements on items not listed on the meeting agenda for public comment. If you have a point of view for a specific agenda item, I ask that you hold it until I request that during a particular agenda item. Public comment time is not intended as a time to raise issues specific to a particular student, staff member, or administrator. Rather, it's a time to provide your insights on issues more generally and of a wider concern. As a general rule, the board will not respond to public comment. I ask that you begin with your comments by clearly stating your name and school attendance area. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes. We will use a timer. Board neither endorses nor censors any opinions expressed in public comment. And please keep your comments civil. It appears we have one in the room. We'll start with the one in the room. I have Sarah Porter, Porter, and then we'll go to Zoom if we have someone.
Good evening. I was coming tonight just to observe, and I was thinking, I need to email the district when I get home. And I thought, wait a second, I'm going to stand in front of y'all. My name is Sarah Porter. I have a in 3 days going to be fifth grader at Sunset Elementary and an eighth grader at Issaquah Middle. One point of note, both comments are on transportation. I brought up to you last year the issue of our middle schoolers sitting out front of Issaquah Middle School through all the weather before they get allowed inside, and we know it leads to disciplinary issues. And we were told that there was a solution, and there was a solution, but it didn't work. So nothing's changed. So I'll be curious to see how that hopefully changes some this year. The other thing I'd like to bring up is the activity bus schedule has been released. And the reason we attend Sunset, and I'm hoping everybody knows a visual of the district. I live in that South Cove area, which is that pocket neighborhood that's south of I-90. Sunset, although the neighborhood is very close to a lot of our houses, is not a walking school because it is not safe to walk from Sunset into the houses that adjoin it. Yet the activity bus schedule that's been released has all of our middle schoolers being dropped off at Sunset. That bus, when activity bus drops off there at the top of the neighborhood, which then the students can all filter through, you will see 25 to 30 students be dropped off. It is sports, clubs, activities, tutoring, after school support, all the gamut is instruments get off, all sorts of things are happening on that activity bus. And what I'm afraid of and what the community is afraid of is now access. Because unless you have a parent or an adult that can be there and pick you up at Sunset, you have now lost all of those houses in there are really not being served by that after school activity bus. So we're sending in emails, but since I'm here, I thought I'd let you know of the community concern around that new transportation schedule. And I am sure, since the reason is it's a shorter bus route for drivers, and I know through sitting through meetings, it should be about the students. So I encourage us to look at that.
Thank you for your comment. Any additional comments in the room? Hi, Stephen. Any on Zoom? None on. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for attending the meeting and sharing your point of view. We appreciate the comments made at meetings and through email. Next, we will move to the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Consent agenda is a meeting management tool whereby the board is able to pass multiple items with one motion. Consent agenda items have been reviewed by the board prior to this meeting. So we have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes. Next to the establishment of the regular agenda. Superintendent, any changes to the regular agenda?
No changes.
Thank you. And with that, we will move to our first official item, which is the review of the work study. And since I was not here, I am really looking forward to hearing about the work study, which was held earlier this evening on third grade reading. Who would like to get us started?
Well, I can start. Yeah, we had a really good discussion about third grade reading, the SBA scores, the iReady and phonics proficiency scores, and Dr. Bailey took us through an exercise of observation into the data and our things we notice, things we wonder about, things we celebrate. I'm not sure if I missed a category there, but it helped us to go through and understand what we see and what others see. And there were certainly things to celebrate in some of this data. There were closures in some gaps, and yet in other places, consistent gaps between all students and the BIPOC list of students. There was good news in looking at the growth matrix and how some of our students that are fall below grade level, below or approaching on the SBA, but end up having high growth, which is the means that will allow them to catch up over a couple of years because they're growing more than 1 year's worth. Of course, we had more wonderings about how to move more kids that are in the below or approaching to allow them to move from the low to the high growth. So it was a good exercise. I think it helped me appreciate all the things that they go through and looking at this data and trying to figure out what interventions help students and which students are helped by which interventions. So I thought it was a good discussion. I'll open it up to the rest too.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was important was the fact that they're going through this, I believe they're going through this same process of noticing, wondering, celebrating at the individual schools with principals and staff so that they can, I mean, because we looked at the data at a district level and then parsed down to a school level. But of course, at each individual school, they're going to be looking at grade levels and classroom levels and really digging deep into the data. So it was good to give the board an overview of what's happening at each of our schools.
I think it's also a reminder of just how complex you can look at data sets and have so many questions still outstanding as to what does this mean? What's included in this data? What's not included? To be able to really kind of come up with some answers or some trends. And although I don't know the difference between what the Smarter Balance assessment looked like in 2015 versus 2023, to see that there's more third graders that are proficient now overall is helpful, at least in some of the schools. So seeing that our bottom number school that was at only 50% proficient in 2015 is now on average 58% proficient. It's not where we want it to be, but you can see that growth, and that same growth correlates to the highest level school that went from 86% to 93 or 92. I can't remember off the top of my head. So that the differences are still, there's still the gap is there between our lowest and our highest, but that both are rising. And that's really one of the things that we want to be seeing. So to me, that was a celebration while still recognizing we have work to do.
Did you want anything, Director Allen? Superintendent, anything from you?
I appreciated the discussion that was brought forward and the protocol to help look at data in similar ways that we're asking our educators, our classroom teachers to look at data. So it's a helpful protocol to help us not go up the ladder of inference, because there are so many questions we can look at through the data analysis. We are trying to work on bringing more focused data sets for discussion, analysis, and potentially insight. And so appreciate that this is a first step to focus on one particular milestone along the trajectory of many milestones from the board discussion. And I don't know if any board members want to share whether that's helpful to continue to go deeper, and also with a couple data sets versus to do a broad, view of all data sets. But it'd be helpful to get some feedback on that as well, or reflections.
Well,
now and ongoing, but if you have a moment and you would like to respond, feel free, but we can also, continue to test that out.
Yeah, I think third grade reading is a really important one. It's important not just for our students, but across the country. Like it's a benchmark for us to be able to compare ourselves to. It's the first time that we have state testing that we can see how our students are doing. But again, I challenge this district to look at it as that's also a moment to connect to how we've done pre-K through grade 2. And we have data points with WAKIDS. So I would encourage that WAKIDS is our first milestone data point before third grade reading. But those two, and seeing what interventions we're doing that aren't working, I think is going to be absolutely critical if we're going to move the needle on those third grade scores. Because in 2 decades, I would suspect those scores, if you line up our schools and quartiles, haven't changed.
I thought it was good to go deep on a metric, because we've been talking about working towards key metrics, right? And this being one of them. So this was a good one to go deep on.
Anything else? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Look forward to keeping conversation going. I love key metrics. So sounds like progress. Always working though. And with the use of the word progress, Our next topic is works in progress, preparation for start of school year. So Superintendent, over to you.
Great, thank you. So there's a lot happening right now because we're welcoming our students back to campus for grades 1 through 12 on Tuesday and kindergarten next Friday. So there's a lot been going on, and I am always focused on a couple of key things to share with the board and the public. But we currently have only 3 open positions for classroom positions or support positions for instruction across the district, and all of those positions are underway in terms of the interview process and application process. So it's just helpful to know where we are with our open positions in that regard. I will also share that we still have many open positions for paraprofessionals. And so it's an open call to say, if you know of someone who's interested in serving our youth, that is an important role that we are looking to still generate more interest in and applications. And that will that has been a trend over the past year and will likely to continue. So it's an area where we will continue to focus on talent development. As it relates to enrollment, so our enrollment updates as of yesterday, thank you to everyone who completed the enrollment verification process. Our response rate as of the end of the day yesterday was 98.6%, which is very high. I do want to share that overall enrollment appears to be currently down from our projection by about 67 students. And of this, 14 are at the secondary level and 53 are at the elementary level. And the majority of that number for elementary is at kindergarten. So that accounts for about 29 students in that total bucket. So I wanted to give that update. Other important updates on our operations are the audit, which is a topic that I've been bringing forward for updates along the way. We have 2 different audit findings and or results or pending processes to be concluded. The first is a financial single audit, which is on the federal level. And so earlier this month, we were told the audit was in final review, and the timeline for completion of the financial single audit was at the end of August. And we were also told we would receive a draft of the audit in 7 days to craft a response to any findings. But as of today, we have not yet received this draft. It appears likely this audit will now conclude and be released sometime in September. The second is on the accountability audit, and our auditors informed us that they will not be starting the accountability audit until after the financial single audit has been released. And they did let us know they will be reducing the scope of the audit somewhat, but they have yet to begin the planning portion. So that's an update there. For operations, we've had lots of activity, in particular for our facilities, maintenance, custodial grounds teams, preparing all of our buildings, fields, parking lots, and everything. And we'll get a capital project update very shortly. But everyone has been just busy working to prepare our buildings and our spaces for our students and our staff. I did want to note that our food services team has been making greater inroads and outreach for our communities and families. And most of our materials have been further translated into our top preferred languages in the district. And that's been a helpful addition to getting more information from our students about eligibility, in particular for free or reduced lunch. And we've also been tuning our emergency preparedness and making sure that we're updating our emergency response protocols for this year based on what we've learned, and also in consultation with other professionals that are in the space for emergency support. And we will be doing a longer update on operations at the next school board meeting. There is some important notes on traffic because there's some construction happening both in Bellevue, in the Lakemont area, and in Issaquah. So 2nd Avenue is closed right now at a portion that is adjacent to the Front Street and Rainier Trail, or between Front Street and Rainier Trail. So this is closed, and so to minimize impacts on school traffic, beginning on there's a one-way detour. So you can see the signs. If you've been downtown, you'll see the signs for the detour for 2nd Avenue. The city has developed this plan, and they have asked for input from our transportation department, and they have looked at several options to provide a safe way for our buses and contractors and students and other residents, pedestrians, and motorists. This detour will be in effect for 24 hours a day for 7 days of the week until the construction items allow the street to be fully opened. And they are working on the weekends to further accelerate the completion. We're expecting 2-way traffic again on 2nd Avenue to resume on September 16th. Yeah, this is why I'm sharing it, because it's important to know, because this is part of the opening of school. And in the Lakemont area, the city of Bellevue has a failed culvert where Lakemont Boulevard crosses Coal Creek. They've commenced an emergency project where a bridge will be built to secure the stability of the Lakemont Boulevard at the location of the culvert. So during construction, traffic on Lakemont Boulevard Southeast and Newcastle Golf Club Road will be closed entirely while major construction activities are occurring. This traffic restriction will be in place 24 hours a day throughout the construction period, which will be a longer duration, September 23 through April 24. We anticipate the minimal impact from this project as there's a good detour route available. And it may impact some route timing, which we can also adjust for. We've reached out to the city of Bellevue for specific start dates and details and times and are waiting to hear back. So these are big important topics as we prepare to come back for the school year. I'm going to switch gears now because I can.
Sorry,
yeah.
maybe because I'm an IHS parent. It is a bit frustrating that 2 years in a row we've ripped up that road in front of the school at the start of school. So I'm not sure what the planning process is, but that's deeply frustrating for 2 years. So it would be great maybe to have a different conversation about major planning at the start of the school year, because it's unbelievable.
Maybe there's something to do with weather not being appropriate during July and August for tearing up roads.
Well, there's also the concern of
You mean when it's warm and dry?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also the concern of lots of new teenage drivers trying to navigate their way to high school for the first time and coming up with detours and road closures, and they didn't plan ahead for extra time. So let me say that now, students plan ahead for extra time to get to school.
Right. And we also need to make sure that there are good walking routes. If that street is under construction, we still have kids walking to Issaquah High School and Issaquah Middle School, right? They're both next door to each other. So need to ensure that there are safe walking paths that the city has provided for, given they've chosen to do construction at the beginning of the school year.
But thank you for that update. Please continue.
All right. On the instructional side of our work, our staff was welcomed back to buildings today to work with their teams and their building colleagues, combined with some district-led professional development. I attended today a district-wide literacy training with Carrie Yates, the author of Shifting the Balance. And I thought it was a very well done training. So kudos to the teaching, learning and services team, in particular, Michelle Picard, for her leadership of bringing back this author for a second time, I believe, at least in the past 6 months. And it's been a very popular presenter. It was by Zoom. And so teams dispersed throughout the district in different clusters to be able to view and participate in that training. My biggest takeaway was one key shift that Yates was talking about, which is that language comprehension happens before reading comprehension. And so this big shift is making sure that we are recognizing that oral language is an essential ingredient for reading comprehension, and that we need to continue to provide ample opportunities for early language development as well as knowledge building. And so there was a good, regrounding on that. And there were several discussions of myths for how to, what we should anchor on as we consider the development of our readers. And some tools and strategies, as well as overall examples, which were used to illustrate those tools and strategies and best practice. It links very nicely also to our high leverage practices, which I think is always important to build upon our current work. So our teachers and team members have an access anchor point to be able to build and augment as we continue to grow our professional instructional moves. And then I've been really pleased because I've gotten to meet with over 25, I think 27 to be exact, administrators in our district one-on-one since the end of June. And this is an opportunity for me to build and foster continued relationships, to hear about the work of the district across the board, both operationally and instructionally, focus on their work as leaders and leaders of others, and how I or the district can help accelerate their own leadership with their respective team members. So I do this in the summer and then mid-year intentionally, just to keep an eye out and an open door for all of our administrators. And tomorrow I'm excited because I get to meet with our student representatives who will be at the next meeting on September 14th with directors Moraldo and Weaver, facilitated and hosted also with support by Marcel Hauser. And thank you to him for his leadership and support there. But Directors Meraldo and Weaver have stepped up to put a really nice package together, meeting the needs of all of the student input from the the student board representatives from last year. And we're really excited for them to join us tomorrow for their first welcome kickoff and training. So that's it for me.
Thank you. A lot happening for sure. And I'm very excited about our new year with student reps and having improvements in that process. I think it'll be very exciting. So next we have a discussion on our approach to school improvement plans. I believe as an opportunity for the board to have a discussion, I believe, do you have someone joining you at the podium for this one, Superintendent?
Yes, Dr. Dana Bailey and Rich Malice will be joining at the podium to answer any questions. And I have a couple of questions that I'm just going to ask the board directly, and I'll go through them in sequence.
Perfect.
Just to get feedback about how we approach the school improvement planning work and preparation for the board as we prepare for the full year. The first question is how the board feels. In the past, we've alternated to do school improvement plans by feeder pattern or by level, and wanted to hear from the board of whether or not we wanted to continue in the alternating years of level, which was last year, and then this year would mean by feeder pattern, but open for discussion. And as we embrace, being able to look at things anew, I wanted to make sure I surface that, and I'll progress to the next question after I get some input on that.
That's a question for us.
Oh.
Hmm?
I prefer the alternating because I think we get something different from each time we do that.
Yeah, I agree with that because there's value in both processes. When we do feeder patterns, you can see light bulb moments when the secondary principals are understanding what the elementary principals are doing to prepare those kids for the next step, and there's a cohesion there. But similarly, when we do it by grade band or school level, you've got all the principals at once interacting, and there's value there too. So given that I think both of them are good, I kind of like alternating.
All the same reasons. I like the alternating.
I agree. But if I had to choose, I would choose by feeder pattern. If you're going to make me choose only one, I would choose feeder pattern, but I prefer alternating.
That's just similar to what I was thinking. I was like, well, if you force, what would I pick? I don't know which one. I think that alternating works because they both, as Director Weaver just said, they give you different views of things. And so I don't know. I think I might, if I was forced, pick the by level, but I choose alternating.
Well, and I think we just went through a data session, and it would be I think some of the things that's interesting, especially when you do it by level, that they're looking at data that they don't normally look at, right? Your high school principals aren't looking at elementary data and middle school data and vice versa. We took a dive across all the elementary schools, but do all the elementary schools ever themselves see where they're at compared to their colleagues and have the chance to have that discussion? So, I mean, likely there might be opportunities for them to do that during their PD that we're not aware of, but I think it's good for them to hear from the board's perspective when we see that data.
All right, great. So I heard alternating, which means feeder pattern this year, which is helpful because that impacts scheduling. As to the question of if you were only to pick one, that's not a question for right now, nor is it one that I might ask, but we can take that up next year or key moments in this year. Okay, great. So then the second question is about whether or not the board is open to moving the timeline up this year and to, as we think about data itself, provide more of a data update and align that to what then actions are being utilized. And the rationale for that would be we are mid-cycle of the SIP process. And if we move up, it would allow us to look at the year in advance versus in arrears. Which I heard was a point of it that's just hard to be able to look at the data and hear what actions had been applied in the year previously throughout the months, with little room to change or shift if we're doing it in March. So those are, I guess, two questions right there. Maybe I start with willingness to move up, earlier in the year, which is a scheduling puzzle, but important, and just want to get feedback on that first.
When you say plans, you mean our discussion moment. You're not talking actually the physical written plan. As a question back to you.
Yeah, so first part question would be moving up the discussion with the board. And that does there are implications of that for the plan itself as well.
But you're talking about the three SIP.
Yeah,
planning
the three
meetings,
meetings.
right? The
Yeah,
three big
moving the
meetings.
3 meetings up from February/March to earlier in the school year.
Because for me, I dissociate the actual written plan from the discussion. I don't actually care what the plan looks like. I care more about the data sets that you've now created independently, that the schools don't have to go do on their own. You essentially hand them their data and say, make sense of this or do whatever you want from this. So as long as that part continues, I don't actually care what the written plan looks like. As far as moving to the fall, would have been nice to know that a while ago. So if that's the ultimate goal, I think fall of 24 makes more sense. Getting those scheduled for this fall was good luck.
Just to be clear, though, the actual written plans, the board does have to have a motion and approve them, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I don't have an opinion. What I'm saying, I don't have an opinion on.
Yeah.
I've never actually told a school principal, I don't like your goal. You need to change that.
I
So
understand that.
I will say it's a little bit of a rubber stamp with their plans.
I think I did. Yeah. I think I did. Yeah. I think conceptually moving to the fall makes sense because I guess maybe what I found a bit dissatisfying is how does that feedback moment influence what goes into the final plan? And so conceptually, if it is, aligning on what some of the goals might be or what's important, and that ends up in the final plan, I would see that as a positive. I agree that scheduling it, we could see if we can do it this year. If not, 24 might be when we start that. But I think that would be a more satisfying way to go through it for me, is to have that earlier moment, because then for me, the question is kind of, okay, we've had these great ahas in the SIP meeting. I'm not certain that they get incorporated into the plan or what action can be taken in the here and now about them. So I like that move conceptually. I think it's the scheduling that'll be the challenge.
I think another piece for me is I don't know how much time and effort it goes into actually creating the plan. I mean, the ones we've seen not only has been there a significant data set, which I'm sure that you've got, your staff is probably accustomed to getting, there's some time constraints there, but the amount of detail that's in that one, I don't know how much is actually required to be in there. It's very verbose, each one of them. And I don't know, because I'm thinking about what are we obligating staff to do and in what time frame? Is it a state requirement that the SIPs be as detailed as they are of all the things that they're doing? Is that something they've just felt compelled to do? Is that information that other staff, their supervisors have needed? So that's why it's in there. So I don't have an understanding of all the ways that tool is being used to know does it need to be as onerous as it likely is? Because I'm assuming it's a bit onerous, and asking staff to do that in the fall rather than in January, I also think is something I'd want to consider.
And I think for me, I worry about this fall seems a bit premature because unless I missed something while I was gone, I don't think I've heard what are those magical milestone moments that the district and the district administration is going to focus on from entry to exit. And I would love for us to have that cohesive consensus conversation, which I'm assuming those are going to be happening for us sometime over these next several months. And then in the spring, that those are reflected in the SIP plan data sets that you give us, rather than us have these meetings in the fall but it's not really connected as tightly to the strategic plan as I think it might be by springtime. And maybe you already have it all mapped out and I just am the last one to the party and that's totally fine. But I think that's a really important conversation for the administration to have had with the board long before the SIPs actually happen and long before we get those data sets. Because I think that should focus it on that, and maybe necessarily we don't need to see, I think there's key moments in SIPs that may be reflected beyond the district strategic plan, meaning because the board really has cared about the transitions. So that transition of our cohort students from 5th to 6th grade or 8th to 9th grade, those don't necessarily need to be reflected in the strategic plan. And that's something that's really important at the school building level to see, or how our special education students do to go when they go from, 3 elementary schools to 1 middle school and then transition to that, because we see a dip in 6th grade and they come right back up. So those longitudinal points aren't necessarily going to be reflected across your strategic plan, whatever mock-up of the 1-page document may look like. But in general, I think the high points of our conversation with the principals should focus on that. And unless that part's ready right now, I think that it might be premature to do them in the fall.
You're not late to an A party. There was no party without you. First of all, we do have, we're testing out different milestones in general. So we're kind of pacing that out throughout the year. We can pull the data and use the data in a way that's instructive for then improving practice and or getting feedback on those actions this year. So that would happen regardless of where we were in the year. So we do want to then align with the strategic plan. We'll have our first monitoring for ends 1 at the end of the year too. So we view all of this as sort of leading up to that moment anyways, where we'd have continued discussion on different milestones. So the thing I'm hearing, although I don't know if I heard from everyone, was around we could try, but conceptually we are okay trying to move to the fall in general for 2024. But there was a bit of we can try. Good luck for right now. But did I hear that from everyone? I think
I was the only one that hadn't chimed in
Okay.
yet. Yeah, I like the idea of it moving to the fall, assuming where Marnie was going, that the administrators can create these reports in time, right? And all the data is available to them, because it also helps us see what are they seeing at the beginning of the year and what are they doing from that point throughout the year that is going to try to make improvements for the students, right? Versus we tend to see it late in the year, and maybe they've been doing this all from the beginning of the year anyway, and we're just hearing about it at the end. But to me, if we can move it to the fall, let's us get on the bandwagon with them at the beginning of the year and what they're going to be doing throughout that year.
Well, and for me, it's about, is it a compliance document or is it a tool? And I would think that if I'm looking at a school improvement plan, really when staff has dove deep into the data is going to be now. So that if it's not getting developed or it's not even really in place until January, then it's not being used as a tool. It's just a compliance model. Hey, I have to do this thing. So I really would look at what can we do to ensure that it's actually a tool that staff is using to drive their work. And when we look at it in January, I would agree, after all these years, I don't know if it's a tool or a report that's based on compliance.
I mean, it's both. There's a compliance aspect to it, the creation and adoption from the board. However, I know that we are looking at, and our administrators look at it as an action plan of sorts, or a mini plan within their building to drive towards progress. So getting feedback earlier on the data sets that we have available, starting to move that conversation up earlier is very helpful also for our building administrators and our support teams on instructional services to be able to put in place actions and or take insights away that might be new to adjust course as needed is very helpful overall. So it's both and, but you're asking also good questions around conceptually the SIP itself. And I think I'd imagine, since we are mid-cycle within our SIP process of being able to use this year to look at the data that's available that can be also movable and measurable throughout this current school year, combined with adjusting actions as needed and reflecting on what practices might be promising or might not be yielding fruit. And then being able to use that to launch into and align with our strategic plan even as we move into next year with a more fuller rewrite. So this year we're testing out several of the different conversations on which data points matter the most as we look at key moments in the educational journey. So I think I heard we could try. Definitely move up for next year. And we will be focusing on data and actions, regardless of which moment in time we're doing the conversation. Did I hear that? Or
I think that's fair.
did I, yeah, anything from Dana or Rich?
I think I heard looking for a measured transition from the current kind of format to something that's much more closely aligned to our strategic plan as well. Understanding that there would be probably some more measures used at the building level, not just the big milestones, but with that, I think I heard that as well. So.
And that's something we can adjust for next year, because that would be, as Director Moraldo said, maybe onerous to do at this time of the school year.
Okay.
All right, that's helpful feedback. Yes, thank you. Yep. And I think that's everything for right now. And I just heard some also feedback about what would be desired as part of the conversation. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, just to clarify though, it's really the data sets that exist currently, what we usually get, show that transition data. So it'd be like not losing that as you go forward is what I wanted to make sure.
Oh, yes, we were not planning on losing the current data set,
Right,
but
okay.
also dialing up the data sets that are part of a key milestone, deeper dive, and that can happen also outside of SIPs.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Awesome. So we'll move to our next item, which is a discussion of CTE plan. And we have some additional folks joining us at the podium. Superintendent, do you want to make any opening thoughts or comments here?
Yeah, so we're going to have two agenda items back to back. One is a overall discussion, information sharing, but also just clarification and discussion around what is CTE in the district. And then that leads to an action item as the next agenda item for a document that gets submitted to OSPI as part of our CTE work. So there'll be context that's provided and then moments for questions and before we move into the action item. And we have Lisa Neighbors joining us and Rich Mellish as support.
Thank you. Lisa Neighbors, I'm Director of CTE and Secondary STEM. So career and technical education, or CTE courses, are available to students in grades 7 through 12 and are guided by requirements of the state of Washington. In order to be deemed CTE and be funded as such, a course must be approved by the CTE department within the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Before it can be approved, any CTE course must demonstrate it leads to a high demand career with a livable wage through the use of employment demand data, and it must also provide students with opportunities for leadership development. Work-based learning experiences such as, work-based learning experiences such as guest speakers, school-based enterprises, field trips to job sites, and certain CTE courses must also offer college credit or provide students with access to industry-recognized credentials, also known as certifications. In alignment with the strategic plan, academic opportunities priority area, and the strategy, create and communicate unique pathways to graduation that ensure students understand opportunities as aligned to their pathway and post-high school goals. CTE courses are intended to allow students to explore and prepare for careers of interest. CTE courses and their content are guided by not only teachers, but also internal partners and community advisory members who are employed in some of the careers that CTE courses lead to. With 13 middle and 80 high school courses available district-wide, students have the opportunity to explore and prepare for courses in 13 of 16 national career clusters. Further options are also available through WANIC programs at their Lake Washington Institute of Technology campus or on one of their 7 other satellite campuses. At the high school level, students are able to further prepare for careers of interest by earning up to 5 industry-recognized credentials, also known as certifications, and college credit in many courses through local community and technical colleges or AP or IB programs as applicable. Students can also check off graduation requirements in their CTE courses, allowing more opportunity for exploration or pursuit of other courses they find interesting. The process for determining equivalency credit towards graduation is one of two options. The first is that OSPI has statewide equivalencies, which we just grab and implement. The second option is by local determination. In the Issaquah School District, a team of curriculum specialists will determine if a course qualifies based on the standards contained within it. Questions on that portion before we get into the four-year plan?
Any questions? No?
I had one more slide. So the CTE four-year planning requirement is a document required by OSPI as part of the CTE end-of-year compliance report, as well as a federal funding requirement. The current cycle will impact funding one full school year after submission. In this case, it would impact funding in the 24-25 school year. Teachers and staff meet with CTE advisory committees several times per year. During these meetings, teachers, post-secondary, and community representatives review student participation data and evaluate programs annually. The consolidation of information from these meetings is one of the aspects which guides creation of the CTE four-year planning requirement. Within the current four-year planning cycle, there have been two focused areas of change identified: student access to program and career guidance. And so you can kind of see from disproportional gender access in some courses to proportionality by gender. And then the career guidance is our career centers have previously been a come and get it model. And we are working on implementing a better system of going to find kids where they are and drawing them into the career center for supports. There is also one four-year planning goal I'd like to address proactively. So on the CTE four-year plan in criterion 3 under academic integration, the plan for 23-24 states that we will review existing course equivalencies, add new equivalencies dependent upon board decision to reduce restrictions on social studies grad requirements. The intent of this statement is an if-then statement, meaning if the social studies grad requirements become less prescriptive than they are currently for the district, then the courses would be reviewed to see if they meet the social studies grad requirement based on the standards they contain within.
And are we having discussions somewhere on changing the social studies?
No.
So I'm confused on that.
Actually,
Maybe I just don't understand.
Actually, yes, we are, because we have approved the adoption of freshman and sophomore social studies new curriculum. And as part of that, the leadership will be looking at following up on some of the discussions we've had in this forum around whether we wanted to offer more choice in the sophomore year of social studies. So we're in the right time to visit that and make a recommendation to the board. So that conversation is being initiated this year. And if it does open, if we do suggest more options, we would be working with CTE to see if any of them would be CTE equivalencies.
And in the equivalencies, that's where a student would get both. You don't get credit for both, but you get, in essence, how does that work? Explain the equivalence. You get 2 check marks.
Correct.
But you need a certain number of credits.
Yes, it checks. It's 1 credit or 1/2 credit as if it's a semester course, and it just checks 2 boxes for grad requirements. It can check both the box for CTE and the box for our most common one is fine arts.
So it gives you more room for other electives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you're looking at changing the grad requirements or changing the sequence having to do with that sophomore year, is that really where it's going to be focused? Then when would that come to the board?
As part of the recommendation from the adoption committee is typically when it would come to the board. There could be discussions if along the way as needed. The example in this case that has been discussed has been that AP psychology counts as currently an equivalency at Skyline. No,
It's just,
That's it.
it's CTE.
CTE at Issaquah High. Sorry, thank you. Make sure I get that right. Yeah, and but that doesn't count towards the social studies grad requirement because all of our social studies grad requirements are set by subject. And so that's for the adoption committee to say, what do we recommend doing based on the input from the administrative leadership?
And what's the timing of the adoption?
We are hoping that we can make a recommendation this spring. That is ambitious, I will admit, to try to get to that point. And it depends on how complex the sophomore and freshman curriculum adoption might become very complex. So possibly this spring for a potential implementation by the following year, recognizing that changes in grad requirements, students will have already picked courses for next year by the time these recommendations are made. So it really would have the biggest impact then in the fall of 24. And I am more confident that we could do that in either case.
And so the equivalencies, or is that something that you look at every time we do an adoption to see if there's other courses that would come in and come out? Is that just par for the course?
So typically what we do is when we implement a new CTE course, if it's something that's in an area that may be an equivalency, so like a new science-based course or something like that, we'll send it through the review process at that time.
Got it. Oh, yes.
I had a couple of questions and I guess I didn't know which would be the best time. So do we know how many students are engaged in WANIC classes outside of the school district?
I do know, but I forgot to bring those numbers with me tonight, so I can get them for you.
And then another question I had is several years ago, I had been asked by some students about why their journalism class was not a CTE. And I don't know whatever happened to that. Did that ever become a CTE class, or is that something that in the future could be considered?
One fun fact about CTE classes is they are often based on the certifications of the teacher in question. So journalism at Issaquah High and Liberty High are CTE, but Skyline is not.
That's great, because at the time there was I don't even know that it was possible through OSPI. So I think there was some.
So could that change if the Skyline teacher went through CTE training?
Yes, it could.
So that's the difference. Okay.
Correct.
Is there a compensation difference if they are CTE certified?
There is not. There is benefit to the kids for that 2-for-1 grad thing in many cases.
Is that a legislative matter? Do you know?
Which?
About compensating for CTE certification?
Oh, I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know that any district compensates differently for teachers who have multiple certificates.
Any additional questions on our grounding topic before we get into the plan itself? Anything else, Superintendent? This one?
Nope. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want to move to the actual plan, the next topic? Perfect. I do. Hold on.
Maybe
I
do.
I do. Okay. So with that grounding on CTE plan, next topic is the 4-year plan. Do I have a motion?
I move the board authorize the CTE program plan for the 2022-26 school years as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with the presentation. We'll have an opportunity for public input prior to board discussion. Any additional opening before we start this one, Superintendent?
No additional opening, and part of Lisa Naper's last set of comments was to preview for the SO. We were showing that in a contiguous fashion. So if there's anything else you would like to highlight, Lisa, that would be great.
Okay. So the primary, it's not really specific items that I'm looking to highlight, but I just want to kind of make the purpose of this document more clear. So what this is, as I had mentioned previously, it's a consolidation of a lot of work with a lot of different constituent groups, and they come together a couple of times a year and review our courses and then provide a program evaluation at the end of the year. I take that document and I take any goals that they have set within that document and add those into this document. So in most cases, what happens in the annual program evaluation is the groups are very focused on what we did this year and what we can do next year. So they're very narrowly focused. And getting them to expand the focus to multiple years can be a bit more challenging. So you'll see that we have some fairly robust goals for this coming year. So like 2023-24 is fairly robust. The 22-23 is somewhat robust. But then as you get out into 24-25 and 25-26, it becomes a little bit more vague, a little bit less concrete, as there are multiple factors that may play into changes that would happen those years. For example, one of our program plans is to look at new courses for the new high school. And that's been in the same place for years because we have unfortunately not made much progress towards that new high school. So the hope is that that one will actually move. But it's just kind of a review of goals that we have, and then also what we are doing to remain in compliance for OSPI, because this document is then taken and added into OSPI's federal 4-year plan.
Okay, thank you. We'll do public comment and then we'll get to board discussion. So is there any public comment in the room on this topic? Is there any on Zoom? Okay, seeing no public comment. Board, any questions, comments, or discussion?
I have a question, and part of it's on page 5, Stephen, if you want to go to page 5. I know in the earlier presentation, I guess I could ask them too, you said there were 5 certificates that students can.
Oh, certifications.
Certifications, that's what that's what I mean. Certifications they can earn. Is that along the same line of what this says for implementing the CompTIA certification for cybersecurity course?
Correct. So that would just be an added certification if we can get that implemented.
And where is that trying to be implemented? At one of the high schools or across all 3?
So our cybersecurity course is currently at Issaquah High and Liberty High. So it would be in those 2 schools.
I see. Do we already currently have a course that then is trying to turn it into a certification type?
Correct. We're just trying to add the certification to the existing course.
I see. Okay.
On page 2, and you talked about this in the previous slide, or the previous presentation, where you had issues of disproportionate genders in certain classes, and you talk about changing the course names. And that seems like a reasonably straightforward and not terribly difficult thing to do. So I'm wondering why it's all the way out in 24-25.
The process for that. So we only just did our data review in the last, in February of this last year, which revealed to the advisory committees the very clear disproportionality in gender enrollment. I then gave them a minute to think about what their solution might be. And their solution was, well, what if we just rename these courses to try and entice a more diverse group of students to enroll in them? So by February and then April, high school course enrollment was already completed. So we're going to work on changing. They still have to approve this fall in their advisory committee. So we just have pitched the idea. They will take a look at it. They'll say, yes, we want to do it. And then we will implement the process to have that actually changed in the course guide. It's a longer process because the kids won't see the change until high school enrollment in this spring for next year.
Okay, so does this mean you're actually going to work on it in 24-25, or does it mean by the time fall of 24 comes around, students will enroll in those differently named classes?
By the time 24-25 rolls around, the course will be named apparel design.
Okay, which means it actually has to happen
Now,
earlier in 24 because that's when kids read. All right, that's not quite as strange. Okay, thank you.
I have a question on the same page under the accountability section. So can you just expand more on what program approval for health science and STEM programs means
Yes.
and why it fits in that bucket versus the one on page 1 for curriculum, instruction and evaluation, and where it talks about, adopt and implement curriculum for sports and entertainment marketing. So why something fits in one bucket versus the other, and like the difference between them?
Strictly speaking, it would really fit in both. So the reason that I put it in the accountability bucket is because annually we have to go through a program approval process with OSPI's CTE program, where we resubmit courses within these two. In this last year, it was these 2 program areas. What they do is they look at our leadership opportunities we're offering students. They look at the college credits that we're offering students. They look at the certifications, and they make sure that it meets the CTE high quality program guidance that they have out. And then they will either approve or they will send it back and say, no, this doesn't quite meet. You need to fix these areas. And then we resubmit after that. So it's in that case, I put it in accountability because it's sort of a compliance factor, the way that we're checking it off, but it does also impact the, not necessarily the curriculum, but the content standards that are covered. We update regularly to make sure we're staying with current industry standards as they evolve quickly in those fields.
Got it. Thanks. And then do you have any input into how the high school schedule and master schedules get built? Seems like CTE classes, some of them can be really popular, but depending on where they're placed in the master schedule can impact which students can access them. And then you have the added complication at Skyline of block classes, which really impact it. So curious, how do you help support our high school principals in building a master schedule that allows access? Because what I wonder is when you talk about, the equity piece for enrollment, part of it has to do with like when it's offered in the day and what else is competing in that. If it's a singleton class and there's, something else that's really popular as well. So
Yeah. So some of the ways that I help support principals is by making sure they know all of the teachers who are eligible to teach any given course. I have in the past offered suggestions on how they might rearrange things to better fit. Obviously, the final decision in the master schedule lives with the principal, but I provide options and suggestions.
But do our high schools track it, like say like, oh gosh, we offered this class in period 4 and we filled it with 30 kids, but really there's 20 other kids that requested it in the request and we didn't, because we only have one section. Like, do we track the classes that have long waiting lists?
I don't know. That would be a question that we can look into. I know Aaron Connolly several times this year has said, I have had so many number of kids who are unable to get the electives that they wanted.
Right. And I feel like that's a common theme. And
yeah,
I've heard that across from buildings, from counselors, from directors, from students and families. But I haven't heard so what do we do about it? Like, how are we tracking and trending the numbers? And we should have them because we know what kids request. So that's something that every February they're putting in lists. So we know if there's 100 students that have requested to take X and we're offering one section of it. So I would
But the master schedules are, it's incredibly complicated when you get to, which rooms are available, which teachers are available, who's certified to teach what. I remember years and years ago spending some time with Lisa Heckman going over this massive, it was like a whiteboard in her office, trying to make sense of it all. And I would assume they do track that, but they can't fix all the conflicts.
Oh, I agree completely. But from a CTE standpoint, where it's
that's
essential for us to get kids that chance to have taste and decide what is going to be their best post-secondary pathway. I think it's critical that we're giving them the most opportunity to do those. And I just would like to hear the district say, oh yeah, if we see something with a long waiting list that in 1 year we didn't fill, we adjust the calendar for the following year, rather than say, oh yeah, this class always has 70 kids who don't get it. That one would hurt me.
Yeah.
I do know we're adjusting based on demand, but there's also other parts like supply of teachers and that kind of thing. So I think we can I think the heart of the question is how are we looking at the trends across multiple ways to see whether or not our students are able to get into the courses that are most in the CTE lens, most of interest.
And why it then connects to both your hire of Julia Bamba and then what the board has already said is one of our legislative priorities in going into 2024 is the transportation equity or inequities that exist by the virtue of trying to offer all these things at each school versus if we had a transportation plan that was funded that we could have our schools focus their specialty offerings. That would make it easier for you, easier for our teachers, and easier for our students if we had that portability. And that's why this all I think fits together for me, because it's not just like what is the outstanding waiting list at one school, but if you look district wide, like gosh, we have this huge need, but it's kind of missed because we see like 20 students at Skyline are asking for it above that got it, 20 students at Issaquah and 20 students at Liberty. It's really 60 students district wide, which is 2 more sections. So that will help us with the conversation actually when we talk with legislators on this is why transportation is so important for us to be able to have equity for offerings that the legislature really cares about CTE a lot. And so that's why it's all connected for me.
Got it. Thank you. We can build in multiple information points to help inform that. Thank you.
Well, I'm wondering, who's on your advisory committee? Because I'm really interested. I think for us is have we had, and maybe this is part of Julia's work, and maybe, I'm hoping that we get some type of vision for what her plan is during her time to be able to say, how are we engaging the community? How are we engaging the current workforce saying these are the things we need? Because I think, we're looking at a trend where parents are really considering, does my student need to go to a 4-year college to achieve their goals? And so many of them are looking, saying, I don't want my child to have the same level of debt that I ended up having, and without the ability to get a job that will compensate for that. And this is really the area where we supply an opportunity for students, especially those that are like right at that cusp where they're not going to get a whole lot of financial aid, but we know that they struggle paycheck to paycheck families in this area just because of the cost of living here. And what are the opportunities, what we're providing? So I'm excited to see how many kids can come up with a certificate at the end. I think that's important, and how we can make sure, much to what Harlan is saying, is how do we make sure that we have the students that really are seeking that, because that's their high school and beyond plan, and not a 4-year college that's going to end up with them $100,000 or more in debt. So how can we be supplementing and ensuring that they have an opportunity? So I'm a little interested about your advisory committee that's doing some of that work.
Yeah, so we have two levels of advisory committee. The general advisory committee, which works with myself and my central administrative staff directly. We have representatives from like the Hilton Garden Inn, the City of Issaquah's workforce development team. We have Village Theater. We have a couple of post-secondary reps. So we have like RTCs on that one. And I have a representative who represents Lake Washington Institute, Bellevue College, a couple of others. It's a consortium. On our pathway advisory committees, it's a large. Oh, I'm sorry. The other one that we just got on our general advisory is a representative from Blue Origin, which is actually quite exciting. On our pathway advisory committees, there's a lot of them. And so we have like some local physical therapists. I think I have a representative from Swedish, a nursing rep. Gosh, there's a lot. And honestly, my TOSA tracks our membership. And so I'm not quite as sure where we stand on the pathway advisories, but we do have also like some post-secondary representation from Bellevue College and Renton Technical College on those as well.
Any additional thoughts or discussion? Okay, well, we have a motion before us, so we'll head to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? I don't think I heard. Did I hear everybody? Okay, thank you. It passes. Wonderful. Next, we have our 2023-24 budget adoption resolution. We had a public hearing. Budget was held in our last meeting on August 8th. And at this time, we'll call for a motion.
I move the board adopt resolution number 1206, which establishes appropriations for the 2023-24 budget.
Second.
Thank you. So I don't know if we want to start with any updates or commentary. I will call for public comment as well on this topic before we have board discussion. Okay, thank you.
Off. Is that better? There we go. Guess I got turned off. Sorry. So again, we had the public hearing last meeting, as you mentioned, brought some information and attached that to the agenda. There have been no changes to the budget document since. So I just like to make sure people know that there haven't been any changes. That full document, the F-195, as we call it, is attached to this agenda as well. And the resolution has the annual appropriations by the 5 funds. It also has a 4-year outlook that's required for us to put in there as well. I did want to thank the board again for your direction during this past year. It has been a very complex process, so thank you for that. And also just wanted to mention, we have not received any communications from the public directly to our office since. So.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on the budget in the room? None on Zoom? Okay, thank you. Board, any questions, comments, or discussion?
I just also wanted to highlight that this resolution also rolls back our 2024 collection by $3,579,000.
And that's important to point out because again, it goes to the idea that yes, when we go out for our levies, we build in the capacity because we never know what the rules exactly will be as far as our collection or our enrollment. But when we, by the rules, have a limit to how much we collect, we don't go all the way up to the authority that had been approved by the voters. And this is how we show what is rolled back. So I think it's important for the community to see that that is how the process works. And yes, it really does work that way.
I have a question about safety net funding. I saw that it's listed as $4,500,000 for special education safety net funding. Is that what is, it's hard to tell me this, but is that what's anticipated for the coming year, or is that what we got this summer for what was last year?
That is what we've budgeted for the coming year. We actually, I believe it was more like 5 million we received recently. So that number may be, I mean, optimistically, we could be receiving a little bit more than we anticipated. So.
What did we budget for?
I believe we were probably in the same ballpark of 4.5 million. So it probably brought in about 500,000 more than we anticipated.
Okay. And was that consistent with what we've been getting over the past few years?
Yeah, well, I know our team has been doing a lot of good work, and I think we've seen it come up a bit actually in the last few years, 4 or 5 years. So kudos to the work of our special services department and all the work they do to put that in.
Perfect. Thank you.
And we can follow up with the final numbers as they get finalized.
Anyone else?
All I was going to say was for the community, you know, at our last board meeting, we had a robust discussion. So this is just kind of the formality now of the approval of the budget, but we had a longer conversation and asked a lot of questions. And of course, to the community, anybody that really wants to dig in and try to understand this, the Guide to Understanding the Budget is an excellent document, and it's attached to the agenda of our last meeting. I think that was the August 8th meeting where we had the public hearing on the budget. And that's a great tool for anyone to use to understand the school district budget.
Thank you. Not only do you have a robust conversation, because I did listen to the whole thing, there was also then those couple weeks of time for commentary. And it sounds like people did not avail themselves of that opportunity. So seems like you covered things very well in the last meeting as well. So with that, we have a motion on the floor. We'll go to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, next, we're going to continue with our finance focus and move to a discussion of the monitoring of EL5 internal actual financial conditions. So CFO Attorney, shall I leave it with you?
Sure. What I would open with is just a repeat that we are abnormally late on getting our audit concluded this year. So that really, makes it difficult to us to report on this as we would normally. So that's indicated in what we've drafted up for you here for review today. We've provided the red line version and kind of the clean copy. A lot of the rest have been updated portions that we provide similar information. We've expanded in a couple areas where we thought that it was important. But other than that, it should look familiar.
Okay, and do I get to ask yet?
You do.
Okay, no, so remind me, and I know superintendent said this, but when do we think they'll finally provide us the single audit, the financial single audit? That's the first thing that we need, because they're not even starting the second piece of the audit until the first part is done.
Yes.
So tell me again.
Okay.
When did we think they're going to give it to us?
Yes, I had an email exchange with our auditors about a week and a half ago, I believe. He told me that they were on a timeline to complete this by the end of the month. I specifically asked, will we have a period of time to respond and adequate time to draft our response to anything that is a result of that finding? He said, yes, 7 days. So doing the math as we are sitting here now, I know that we cannot meet that timeline. I do not know, but I anticipate they will probably be very close to next week. I'll hear something. We'll have a week to respond to anything. And I'm just hopeful maybe by mid-September. Now, of course, I'm just telling you that based on what I know at the moment. We will reach out again because obviously they didn't meet the timeline that we talked about via email. So at this point, best guess, mid-September.
Okay. Thank you. And I know it's not you guys, so it's just all around frustrating to be waiting this long for the audit results.
Director Merle.
So the compliance issue is around the usage of COVID funds towards technology, correct?
Correct.
And is this other states now? Because I'm trying to remember, I know that Tim Garchaw, the executive director of WASDA, has been working with the FCC. I mean, it's to the point where it's almost every district in Washington. And I'm just wondering, is this really extending beyond Washington into other states as well?
We've been on some of those calls as well. And our understanding is that Washington State by far has the majority, if not, 90 some odd % of these findings. The other states, that's just not the results that they've seen. So unless there has been additional audit work in the last month that I'm not aware of where another state has had these issues, this really looks like an isolated Washington State issue.
So this is an interpretation that the auditor's office is having against the regulations that the FCC put, that nobody else is interpreting that way?
As we see it, yes, correct.
Right. So it's not that the other states are accounting differently so much as our auditors are interpreting differently. Is that a fair statement?
That I believe that's a fair statement. They have their own audits that are conducted and they came to different conclusions.
Okay, so you should, Harlan just referenced to me an article. I think that maybe putting that on the public record so the public can take a look at that article would be helpful.
The auditor did a editorial in the Seattle Times several months ago outlining the issue and impact and asking or pleading for legislative action or coverage or executive, I think even rulemaking to make it protective of Washington State school districts.
I'm sorry, you say that again? So the auditors want the legislature to do some, the federal legislature. Okay, I wasn't tracking, sorry. Okay.
Any additional items to cover on this one? I know we have to come back when we have a completed audit. So this one is obviously not for board action at this time. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for keeping us updated, and we look forward to the next update. With that, we have an update from capital projects. I believe we have Director Mullins joining us at the podium.
As Tom Mullins is joining the podium, I want to share, you're going to get also a preview of some good work that's also been happening on our facilities. I've had the opportunity to drive by Holly Street to see the new playground. It looks amazing, and just want to say I had a exchange with Janelle, who's on the team of capital projects. I said, "How was your weekend?" She said, "Well, I was actually checking out Holly Street to make sure that the work was progressing, because on the weekends it's important to monitor what's happening because no one's around." So I wanted to say really great work to Mr. Mullins and his team for progressing on lots of fronts, and you'll hear more about that. In addition, I also drove around with my husband and son over the weekend, and we checked out the stadium at Issaquah High School, and things look really nice there. So you're going to see actual pictures versus take my testimony for it. But I wanted to just give you that preview, which will happen towards the end of Tom's presentation. So just get you excited about that.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Wanted to provide a status update for the levy 2018, the 2018 levy. And the purpose, we did an update in June, the first board meeting in June, as part of the EL 13 emergency monitoring report. And I wanted to kind of give you an update of where we were at. Approximately $6 million worth of work remains to be completed on the original 14.5 million passed by the voters. Since then, the Capital Projects and Facilities Department have went out and taken an assessment of all the projects that weren't done and weren't listed as done. We found some of those have been done as part of larger projects, remodel projects. Some were done as part of work orders through the maintenance department. One example is the painting of the exterior of Beaver Lake Middle School was done as part of the remodel of Beaver Lake Middle School, those kind of things. So we spent some time, went out, talked with principals, pulled ceiling tiles, did whatever we needed to do, and discovered that some of the work was done. We've updated our list, and we've got a plan to finish the rest of the work. And in that investigation, in that time, there's been some additional projects that have come up, some important projects. Three of them, life safety projects that have come up. And one of them is the fire alarm system at Beaver Lake Middle School, fire alarm system at Maple Hills Elementary School, and the DAS. It's actually a DAS requirement because DAS is distributed antenna system. So DAS system is kind of a repeat. But and then an expanded project is the Clean Buildings Act, which we introduced a couple weeks ago. It's a new state law that is requiring us to go in and start improvements and have them complete by 2026 that deal with energy and energy savings. Beaver Lake Middle School, wanted to kind of recap these projects real quick so you understand what they are. The fire alarm replacement at Beaver Lake Middle School, it was original to the building. It's reached nearing its end of life. It is going to be one of the new systems that we'll be tracking through the new system that is being implemented that will track all of the different systems in the district, so we don't fall into this again where we get a surprise. Preliminary cost estimate was $475,000. We have a similar situation at Maple Hills Elementary School. It's at its end of life. Again, estimated cost about $325,000. And then as part of that, Maple Hills Elementary School, certain schools have what they call a distributed antenna system, or a DAS. It's a requirement by King County anytime we remodel a building or anything, that the building be tested to make sure the emergency responders radios work everywhere in the building. If not, then you have to install a DAS system. We had it looked at. Everybody thought we were good before we did the remodel. The county came in at the end of the project and said, you will install a DAS system. We didn't have the money as part of the project. But now that we're going to go in to ask to be permitted for a fire alarm project at Maple Hills, that will be a requirement that before they permit that, they will require this as part of the project. Preliminary cost there is about $200,000. And we're going to go through and then we'll recap. Yep. Clean Buildings Act, we did our first step, which was the benchmarking, which is where they go out and use energy bills and Energy Star and the state. There's some state information in PSC where we go through and rate each of our buildings. And if you don't reach a certain energy usage intensity, it's a very complex thing, you are required to bring that building up to energy saving standards as set by the state. And 17 of our 31 buildings do not meet that. We're on to our next step now, which is the investment grade audit step, which is where which is where you have a company come in and actually go through those 17 buildings, look and tell you specifically what needs to be done and what the cost of that will be. And that would be work that would be, when it finally comes around, would be the funds for that would be come through a future funding source. But initially, to get the investment grade audit done, we're looking at somewhere around $840,000. So we're looking for funds, and Martin will talk about repurposing of 2018 levy dollars to do that.
Thank you, Tom. I will mention too on this slide that we had in our levy 2022 project list about $250,000 for this, and that was well before we knew exactly what this would take. And we actually talked to some folks about the estimates on that, so it turned out to be a little bit lower than, well, a bit lower than we had hoped. So we wanted to be fully transparent on what we were thinking here in this plan and how we would come up with our funding options. The first two you see there, Tom mentioned that capital projects and facilities did some work to evaluate where we're at on these projects. In the last update we gave you, we had on a longer sheet an estimated remaining to complete for these two projects of $700,000 each. Since then, and looking at those two buildings, we believe we can finish out what needs to be done at those buildings, and we can essentially reduce those amounts by $500,000 each, and take the combined $1 million and spread them among these three projects that Tom just talked about, because we see those as high priority projects that we need to complete as a district. So that is the plan on how we would get to the funding sources for those three projects. In terms of the clean buildings investment grade audit, it's going to take a few different funding sources. So this was meant to kind of lay out how we were going to get there. First thing is project 1828, that expanded exterior drains. I believe that was completed through our maintenance department at some point in the past. And so we were able to confirm that when we went out and looked at the building. The project 1823 and 1829 are HVAC recommissions. the nature of the work, and Tom can be more specific if I miss any details here. It doesn't make sense for us to do that work before we have this audit. So it behooves us to use these funds to get the investment grade audit so that we know how to do the work, and we pinpointed what we need to do at each of those buildings. And then finally, we have some funds in 1840 that have that we are not needing to utilize, so we would repurpose that for this as well. And so this gets us to almost $600,000, which we would combine with the amount that we had of $250,000 in levy 2022 to come up with that number of 840. We plan to continue to track these projects on our tracking sheet so that we know what those projects went to, so that we have a history and a transparency of how we use those dollars. There is another sheet attached to this agenda that has the full roster of 2018 levy projects. On that document, we have bolded these areas that we are making changes to, so that it's transparent in how those changes were made from the previous iteration of this document that was brought to you in June. So I also wanted to point out, I took verbiage from the resolution, the 2018 critical repairs resolution, so that we feel comfortable letting you know that this is not something that we need board action on, and that we as a district are able to do this in terms of the language in the resolution. So just wanted to have a comfort level there. And so the plan next steps, pending board feedback, we intend to go ahead with this plan. We want to continue to work on those 2018 critical repairs levy projects and get as many done as possible in the time that we can. Obviously, we want to make progress on that. We want to show the public progress on that, and we want to do good work. We also, in capital projects department, in collaboration with facilities, wants to beef up how we look at this. We get a forward look at the critical systems that we need to replace, and that we have plans in place so that we get ahead of the curve when we have things that are ending their life, and that we know how we're going to fund them and when we're going to fund them, and get ahead of that curve. So did I miss anything on that last slide, Tom? All right. Are there any questions?
So I have two questions that are probably incredibly basic, but I just want to make sure I'm tracking with what you're saying. In the document that's the detailed 2018 critical repairs levy status, in that document, I think based on what you said, anything that remains on here is either in progress or future. We have validated still needs to be accomplished.
Correct.
That some of the items that previously, I just don't have the two in front of me that are now completed, may have been open before.
Correct.
So everything is we're validated. Okay. So
Correct.
Super basic question number one.
Yep.
Super basic question number two is back to the clean buildings and the slide, that's slide 10, which is calling out the two items on Challenger HVAC recommission and Newcastle HVAC.
Sure.
And so do we know that those things are fully overlapping, so that what the clean buildings investment or statute is looking for is equivalent to what would have been in the HVAC recommission?
Yeah, as part of the benchmarking first step that we've completed, every school site that was listed, the 17 that were listed, every one of them had commissioning, because it's a requirement to go in as part of this process and recommission those buildings, recommission the HVAC, the lighting system, the boilers, everything. So those will be accomplished as part of that project. And Newcastle and Challenger were both on that list of buildings that needed to be meet the new standards.
Can I add
Great.
on to
Yes,
your
please.
question? Because what do you mean recommission?
Recommissioning, when you when you build a building or when you do a major remodel, you do what you call commissioning. And commissioning, you hire a commissioning agent, they come in, they look at the specifications, they look at all the systems, and they go through and they test and they tweak those systems to make them match what the design or the best efficiency is. Everything from airflow, how lights come off and on with timing. It's a very large list of items they go through in a very complex. And it's become more and more complex because they have, with the energy codes, they're getting more requirements put on them that they have to complete. And it's quite a process that we go through.
And this work that was to be the Challenger and Newcastle, the recommissioning will take care of what was the original project?
Yes, it
Okay,
will be.
and I think
yep,
that's what you asked, and I'm
Yep,
bringing
yep.
it around that was the answer.
Yep. Those it will be the exact same
Okay.
thing and even more than what was intended in 2017-18. Those standards have been ramped up. So yeah, what was going to be done will even be done to a
More
higher
robustly.
standard. Yes.
Yeah, that was one side of my question. So thank
Okay.
you. And the other side was that recommissioning meets, I guess, the goals of this clean building requirement.
Yes. it does.
Same thing.
Yep,
Okay, perfect.
Exactly. It's one of the things we will have to do
Perfect.
to meet those standards.
I think my question was way more basic and that it's called an audit, but it sounds like work is actually going to get done as opposed to when I consider an audit, I think you just look at things and say, this is what needs to be done.
We have to do what it says that we need to do.
So is it
That's-
840,000 for the audit and the work or just the audit?
Just the audit. So all that they will do is this
Yeah,
company will
that's what I
go
thought.
through, yep, and they are an ESCO, which is part of a state program that it allows certain companies to be certified and come in and do work for you without having to go out to bid. The one we chose was McDonald Miller is who we're looking at. They will come in, they will go through all the systems, they will do all the testing. They will create a list that will give us the energy savings we need to bring us down, the energy use intensity down to meet the new standard. And they will give us that list of everything that has to be done and a construction cost to complete that and a guarantee that we will meet the standard.
And so it's actually the same work of a recommission, just to a deeper level?
Nope, it's not. They're not going
So
to
the
do any of the
recommissioning is
actual work. Yep,
Right.
commissioning is the actual work.
So
All
then
the
how are we going to fund the actual work getting done?
That's the
that
next
is-
step.
That's
Okay.
next step.
That's,
Yep.
that's another discussion for another
Well,
day, I'm
I mean,
assuming.
And that goes back to for Challenger and Newcastle, if they needed the recommission and they still need the recommission. But all we're doing is an audit to tell us how much all the work is going to cost. How far out is it ever going to be before we get to the recommission of Challenger and Newcastle?
Challenger and Newcastle, if everything holds as the state requirements are, I think those buildings will have to be done by 2028. They will have to be done. We will have to do the work that brings those energy use intensities down.
Mhm. Well, most of this is all going to have to be funded by potentially future money coming from a capital levy type.
Yep.
Or bond. I mean, I don't know the scope of the cost of the work and the type of funding that we would need for it.
Yeah, this Clean Buildings Act affects every building in the state, every commercial building in the state of Washington, 20,000 square feet and bigger, public, private,
And
government.
who made this bill? Who made this Clean Buildings Act?
It was done as part of it was passed in 2019, I think is when it was, and
Passed in the federal or the state?
state.
In
It's a
the
Washington
state. And are they
state.
funding
all
any
of
of
our
the fixing work?
All of our current representatives, I believe.
Yeah,
would have
and
Yes.
voted
did they
yes to
allocate
this.
any money to us to fix these buildings?
There's some initial
That's funny.
early adopter money of about, I think somewhere $72 million for early adopter, but everybody's trying to come up to speed and understand how all it's going to be.
And do the audit.
Yeah, and do the audit and come
You
up with
can't do
the
work
money to
until you
do the audit. Yeah,
I'm supposing that other districts will have opportunity to use SCAP money for this, right?
That I'm not sure of.
Possibly, and I just imagine it probably won't close the gap much on what they need to do in total. What they get from SCAP if they're trying to use them.
So page 9 or slide 9, when you list for Discovery and Endeavor, it says estimated remaining to complete 700,000.
Yep.
And then your new estimate's 200,000. But if you look at the levy 2018, you list it as so it's items 1832 and 1834 is 475,000. So I'm
Yes.
confused why those numbers don't match.
Sure. So originally, as you mentioned, they were 475. We looked at this back in May, June to come up with the new estimates of what we thought this would take now, as opposed to the original estimate. That was assuming that all of the work at those buildings still needed to be done. And so when we got additional information on what had been done through other projects, that reduced then. So we didn't know that information. We had increased it to a kind of a current amount before we realized, okay, there is work that has been done and we can reduce this down to whatever's left.
Okay. So I think for me, I'm uncomfortable pulling money from the 2018 project list when there's still $6 million worth of projects that haven't been completed. And so I would rather the Challenger and Newcastle HVAC, if you have to pause those projects for the clean building audit, which makes sense to me, but that money be used to make sure that all those 2018 projects get completed. An $840,000 cost of audit is something that I think that we need to have a bigger conversation about where that comes from. And I think that should be part of any sort of future capital request, because it's not going to be just be, here at this point, it's not just $840,000. That's just the cost. For them. So it's going to be that plus what you estimate the costs are going to be based on what other districts are already experienced. And I think that needs to be bundled together so the community understands very clearly, hey, so we estimate that there's going to be $10 million for us to meet these new state requirements by 2028. And so I think rather than trying to piecemeal it like this, because we've got to bring those 2018 projects to conclusion. And we've got to ensure that we have the money to do it. And I think based on looking at that project list for the things that have come in under budget so far, that have been big projects and big under budgets, which has been great, kudos to your team. There's still a lot of projects that need to be done. And I would rather us get these done and to not pull that money out of 2018. Because I think that what you're announcing to us is a little surprise. Thank you, legislature, for another unfunded mandate. Is not going to be an $840,000 price tag. So if we thought it was just going to be that, then doing this, I could probably get behind. But it's just like scratching the surface of what's going to be. I'm probably severely underestimating it at $10 million.
Yeah.
So I think we need to have that as sort of, that may be a huge chunk.
But
of a
doesn't
bigger
this money have to
conversation.
be spent now?
Yeah, that's so that's the question is, what is the timing for finishing the audit? Because our immediate need is to complete the audit so that we'll know what work needs to be done and what money needs to be not created, 'cause
or-
that's the wrong word, but
or what?
asked for through a capital levy or a bond. So what's the timing requirement for the audit?
The audit, well, there is no timing requirement for the audit. What the requirement would be is for the work to be completed. Buildings over 200,000 square feet, which are our 3 high schools, the 3 comprehensives, have to be done, all work done and meet the requirements by 2026. Then the next step is, I think, 90,000 to 200 by 27, I think it's June of 27, and then 20,000 to the 90,000, 2028.
Which would fit or the timeline for us to have a bigger conversation about this. So I just don't think this has to happen right now.
Yeah, I still feel like this has to happen now so that we can
Yeah,
have the
so we
audit to
know what
tell
we're-
us what work needs to be done and what funding we will need to be able to go out and ask our community for.
Yep. And there are options for breaking the audit up into smaller chunks.
Okay.
Because you could, what's the biggest priority would
You
be
could
three
audit the three
buildings.
high
So, yep, the 3 high schools, get that piece done. One of the things we'd hoped was the audit would help inform us what we would need
Yes.
to plan for.
Yeah.
That's where that would be the one pro to do the audit now or soon. But also understand that pulling money from the 2018 may not.
Right. Sorry. You then come back.
I gotta go back to my basic question again. Because I thought the two we're talking about, or at least the two that are on slide 10, the Challenger HVAC and the Newcastle HVAC, that they are 2018 projects.
Yes.
So to finish the 2018 projects, we would do this anyway. Yes? Question mark?
No, I'm fine with them pausing those if that's what they need to do, but get everything else
Wait, we have-
finished because they may need to repurpose that $250,000
For the
fully
bigger,
complete 2018.
but that's what I guess my point is, but they're in 2018, no? This original line item of the recommission.
They are, but I don't think it's wise to carry forward 2018 money to a 2023-24 project or bill.
So wait, you have Discovery and Endeavor. Those two, that's what's on page 10. And those are still going to happen. They're just not going to cost as much.
They're
as we
going to
thought.
cost $1 million less than we thought.
So we're going to be able to use that money for other things.
No, if you go by the 2018 list, it's not $1 million. It'll be $275,000 per building. So
Right, 'cause
$550,000.
the original.
You have to go by the original numbers on this 2018 list that they have attached to the agenda.
Right. Sorry, so let me try to ask again, because again, I feel like I'm struggling with this. On slide 10, the two items, 1823 and 1829. Which is the Challenger HVAC recommission and the Newcastle HVAC recommission. They were 2018 projects, correct? So.
Yes.
So I understand that by doing it now, we also check the box, back to our CTE example. We also check the box for our clean buildings piece when we do those.
Wait,
But-
we're
He
not
can't
actually
do- he can't do
recommissioning that.
those.
Yep.
Aren't you saying that
He needs
instead
to
of
audit.
recommission, they're going to take the money and put it into the audit? And then in a future time, the audit will tell them they need to recommission them. And then
Okay, so
will
they
do
just
it.
go on hold.
They
That's
go
what
on
we're saying.
hold.
Okay,
Yep,
that's
yep,
what I was like,
Exactly. Yep. Good way of explaining it.
okay.
And Tom, just to clarify too, so on that note, there might be clean audit findings that have implication for how to do that recommission, which we need the audit to reveal to us so we don't recommission now and then have to recommission again.
Mhm. Yes.
That's
exactly.
possible,
Yeah,
correct?
that's possible.
So putting them on hold makes sense until we've done the clean building audit. Where you were going was that instead of taking the funds from holding those projects and applying it to what it will cost us to do the clean audit, to just hold them back to ensure that all the rest of the 2018 projects have the funding they need. Is that what I heard you say?
Absolutely, because what I heard from the administration was we have some high priority life safety projects that we have to do.
Yep.
And if we're going to divert 2018 funds, like I'm fine doing that for the life safety projects at Beaver Lake and Maple Hills. Like, yes, go
Yep.
forth, do yesterday.
Yep.
Audit for projects that have to be done by 2027. It just doesn't make sense to me. And because this conversation we're having about capital is going to extend into 2024. So we could still get all this done in either this academic year or the calendar year of 2024, all in tandem. And I don't think having the scope, I don't think we need the scope. I think we need to ask for, I think we've learned that we need to have high estimates anyways.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trust what they give me anyways. So I would want to hear what other school districts have already experienced. And then add on what we think the estimate is going to be and go with that, because I don't actually, those numbers wouldn't be something that I would move on anyway. I would rather take a much higher estimate that our superintendent and her team would provide to us to ensure we have enough money to get that done. I don't want us to make the same mistake that happened in 2016, because we had the money for high school 4 that we asked voters for, but in 2023, that money doesn't go nearly as far.
Right.
And so I would trust more what you have to tell us than what any audit's going to say.
Director Moraldo.
Well, and I just wanted to know, could you make a high rough estimate of what it's going to, how many schools this would affect? Sounds like it's going to affect every single one.
17 of the 31
17.
are initially is what we're finding out. They could be anywhere from a recommissioning of a school is all that would be required. It's so close to other schools require HVAC replacements, lighting upgrades, lighting system upgrades, all sorts of different things. So.
Because I'm toggling between this of how extensive could that difference be? Like, I don't want to go out to the voters for something and ask them for 10 million and actually only cost 6. But I also don't want to go out and just go, or spend the money now and go, well, I think it's going to cost. I think I want there's part of me that wants some assurance in spending the money on the audit now, so that when I ask voters, I can feel like I'm asking competently for money from their pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's the toggle in between. But I certainly am agreeing with you that so often we get estimates back, and then it ends up costing a boatload more.
Yep.
But
and I can look
my
on this list
impression
and see
too
it.
Was what you just said, that we have to do the audit in order to figure out what to ask the voters for in the next critical repairs levy. So if we push this out to the next levy,
which is
now
24.
we have no idea how much money to ask for.
Right, because we would have to be deciding in what years? Well,
26.
So, but if there was a bond in 24, and let's say we asked 10 million and the audit shows it actually ends up being 14 million, that's what you build in to the conversation for the 26 levy. So I think you have it in tandem, and that, but I think that what 17 buildings are. You have a guesstimate based on what other districts are already done. I would trust our administration to be able to give us reasonable estimate within plus or minus $5 million. And that would be close enough for me when we're talking about what's going to be a very big number anyway, when we talk about completing high school number 4. So we're not talking about the difference between a potential bond that would be 50 million versus 55 million. Our number is much bigger than that.
So I have one more question that makes me on one side of this or the other. My toggling will stop and I guess I'm buffering on the fact that these have been on the list for so long. Is there anything from a health and safety or building environment or that's problematic that these have been waiting this amount of time that we would want to take some quicker action?
Challenger in Newcastle in
Yes.
particular. No, we've verified
Okay,
with the
then I
maintenance
can-
department that there weren't an extraordinary amount of work
Okay.
orders or anything like that would raise a flag.
And I might have already asked this, you might have already answered it, but if we go forward with the clean building audit, this 840,000, how long does the audit of our buildings take?
The estimate, we've talked to them about it, and each month it gets longer, because you can imagine how many commercial buildings over 20,000 square feet are in the state of Washington. Everybody's queue is filling up. Now, whether that's a method to get us to sign on the bottom line or not, I'm not sure, but it seems to be going. So they initially said 3 to 5 months. They're probably at 5 to 7 months now to do the audit. It's quite extensive. They get into every piece of HVAC equipment, all the lighting systems. It's quite an extensive program. So,
And is there benefit or problem with breaking it up and doing the high schools first? Like the middle schools in a separate and next, and then elementary.
Separate audit.
Well,
yep.
Staging.
Yep.
yeah,
And they're the positive the pro we were seeing coming out of doing it all at once was the informed information to go out for it, to know how much you're going to ask for. But no, other than that, you could break it up, do the high schools first. And that has been offered to do. We could do that piece first, use the 250,000, a portion of that, whatever it would take to get that audit done. That would give us some good information on those 3 of the 17 buildings.
well, then it would also give us time to be working on the other projects
Yep.
to acknowledge whether the estimates to complete them are turning out to be accurate as we go. So.
Yep.
Director Miranda?
I think it sounds to me like that to me is the safest option, is to utilize dollars now to do the audit on the high schools. Because I think if you're going to see changes in an HVAC system, the largest buildings are going to have the largest impact. And then then I'm more comfortable in the smaller buildings to be able to do some of those estimates, especially based on the estimated work/cost that might be required in a high school. I think we can extrapolate more from that so that it's a less expenditure now with an idea of that because we're going to have to go out for money, then being able to feed in that remaining 500,000 into the cost of the repairs for all. That I'm comfortable with.
And I think that makes perfect sense, but I would repurpose money from the 2022. Like they already had 100,000 allocated for that. And then we haven't gotten nearly like halfway through our 2022 list. So I would pull out of the 2022 levy for this, something that's in the, like that 2022 levy was passed for things were 2022 to 2025.
Yeah.
So I would pull it from that.
That makes sense.
Chunk of money, because I would hold 2018 intact until you get much further down the road with all of those projects.
Is that an option to use 2022 funds?
Absolutely. And if I'm following correctly, we do have the 250,000 that's sitting there for this purpose. We do have some reserve that we've come under in a little project. So we can talk about the 2022 levy dollars to start with the high schools and get going on that, if that's what it sounds like.
And clearly you can use the Challenger and Newcastle dollars because those.
No.
I would hold those because there's
Really?
we still have the $6
for
million worth of
Gotcha.
2018 projects that aren't done that I worry there's going to be
Okay.
a need.
So those won't happen, but that money will be repurposed to something else.
Well, or available
if
for things
needed.
that cost more than we expected.
That were in the
Yeah,
2018
we're in the 2018
list.
Yeah.
So it gives you more flexibility to manage the 2018 projects and still complete them.
Yes. I think that, for me, that makes sense.
But the part that I'm not comfortable with is pushing off completion of the audit until the next levy, because I think that's too late. And I want to be able to tell the voters, hey, we did this audit and we're pretty sure that we need X amount of dollars to comply with this act, as opposed to, well, yeah, we haven't actually looked at it yet, so we're just guessing. That's what I don't want to do.
But in this case, though, if we move forward with the high schools, we could say we've been able to do high school and extrapolate that to the smaller buildings. I think that's probably a fair.
And or look at the 2022 levy to see where you can
To see if there's
To see where
money there.
extract some funds from there to keep your audit going as quickly as possible. Because I go both ways. We absolutely need it for the high schools because that work had to be completed by what, 2026? So
Yeah, that's
we
before the
need
next
that,
levy.
right? So that's the biggest complexity to it, but we really want to know the full scope of the work that has to be done, so we know what we'll be needing to communicate to our community as far as funding that we'll need. So I guess I'd like to see what you can do to look at the 2022 levy to try to extract a little bit of money that could be used towards this audit and keep the whole thing going as much as possible.
And can I just add, because I wanted to say this like 20 minutes ago. I really appreciate the transparency that you are giving us on this. This is not something we have had. This is something we haven't had in a long time. So I really appreciate the level of transparency that is allowing us to have this whole conversation. So I just wanted to
Thank you.
make sure I said that.
And we intend to continue to bring these scenarios back. And as we put money toward the audit at the high school, we are able to address these other projects that are high priority. We will now update our plans. We'll update our project list and we will bring it back. And as it progresses and we identify potential other levy 2022 or whatever source it is, we can continue to come back so we can dialogue about this as we go along.
Yeah, and not that I propose it right off the bat, but the board has its emergency funds. And this would be potentially a place to use it and to take back to our legislators.
We haven't
and
even
say-
started school.
And say, I know, I am not. I know. We do it right this minute. This school year's just started. We just approved the budget, right? But I'm just saying
Approved the
that
budget
is the
14
kind of
minutes
thing
ago.
this is. And take it back to the legislature and say, yes, you passed this great thing, but without additional funding, look at the position you're putting us in to try to meet it.
You are correct. That is an option.
Not yet.
I would like to open a building or two first. It's wonderful. I think that was a great conversation. Thank you, Director Weaver, for sharing that. Facilitated by a lot more clarity of what's happening and what really still needs to be done. So greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. And I think
It sounds like we've got some other show and tell.
Mr. Mullins is going to show you some pretty cool
Yes.
pictures.
Oh, yes.
like that.
Oh, yeah, let's end on a happy.
Oh,
note,
the good news.
right? Yeah, that's right. We want that.
Either one, whatever you pull up first.
Okay.
Okay, as you know, we've completed the work at the Issaquah High School Stadium. Turf is done, the track is done, the lights are done and on and usable. The city gave us the go yesterday. The sound system issues and upgrades have been done, and we have one task that is working with Stephen on Monday to get the scoreboard. There's a slight timing delay between the scoring booth and the scoreboard that we're getting taken care of. And it's exciting. I think we'll have some happy IHS Stadium folks. That's Zach Goldberg, Diana's husband, had a drone, gave us a good couple photos. Yeah, went over, you can see the new poles. There's 1, 2, and they don't catch the other. There's one over there. You can't quite see it. So just a couple good pictures. You can just go right on through, Stephen.
How are we doing with our birds?
He's up there still making a mess, or she, I'm not sure. He or she is making a mess. Maybe they both are. And we are, I think it's November when we get the opportunity to come back. You can see the pole. It's the one up to the left of the new pole. These are night photos that were taken the night, Tuesday night. My Royce and Janelle from my office and a consultant came out and they took lighting tests and they verified the light on the field around the track, and then they step out and make sure there isn't light bleed into the surrounding
You
areas.
can really see how dark it is just at the
Yeah.
outside of the
It's-
track.
I
which
know,
is
but
great.
then you see how light the field is. That doesn't
know.
make anything like.
That's great.
Yep.
I know.
That's it. And then a few pictures of Holly Street. Playground. It's just the playground. It was just, Janelle's finishing it up right now. We're dealing the last few items with the city, but as far as construction goes, we are complete. This is a soft, if you get an opportunity to go out, you can walk on it. It's real soft. It's got a 1.5 inches or 2 inches of foam underneath it, and then the synthetic grass. It's got an eco sand filling. It's not rubber. So it's all meant for specifically for little kids to play in. All the play equipment there. We've got the covered play out at the top of it. The covering does that. Rubber tile underneath all of the equipment for fall protection. And then we've got a track that goes around the exterior. Should say they decided they wanted to go clockwise, and because they've got a lot of trikes and the kids like to race the trikes around the track. So that's going to be a big deal. So very exciting.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Good to end on that good news. That was awesome. So next we have our, excuse me, second read of our governance process or GP updates. And so do I have a motion?
I move the board adopt the revisions to governance policies GP3, job description, and GP4, agenda planning as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Director Weaver, are you taking us through your next round? Oh,
No, I did it.
Director.
Oh, I'm sorry.
These were mine. We did the first read at the last meeting. These were very simple changes in GP3 board job description. We were simply adding to annually develop and adopt the budget development guidelines. And that was the only change. And then in GP4 agenda planning, it was adding an item to the planning calendar to include adoption of the budget development guidelines. And again, this was just putting into policy a practice we have always been, well, in my time have always done, but this ensures there's a grounding in partly why we do it, because it's in our policies. And that's it.
Let's see. Thank you. We should take public comment. Is there any public comment in the room on this topic? Is there any on Zoom? People are really
excited.
Watching.
Any board questions, comments, discussion? I think it's very straightforward. Thank you for taking us through both of these. Any comments, Superintendent? No, you don't have. Okay, wonderful. With that, I believe we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? No, it passes as well. Thank you very much. With that, we will move to legislative matters. Director Gallinger, any updates for us?
I don't have any updates other than as we get ready to start school, I'll be reaching out about getting legislative visits in district scheduled. And then I would love to, again, I think I've sort of gave the foreshadowing to our superintendent about transportation. And I think now's the time for us to actually start building. If we were dreaming, what would a transportation plan that is fully funded in Issaquah look like that would equitably transport our students in a way to deliver the education that our legislature thinks that they're funding?
Have heard that request, and we're moving forward with some ways to create the right assumptions to bring forward something that is something fairly robust and ambitious. No, thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments on this one? Director Meraldo, anything you wanted to add?
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to announcements and correspondence. Do we have any additional items to share in addition to what was included in the agenda? Anyone? No? Okay, thank you for that. That moves us to calendar and future agenda topics. The key one I have is obviously we're working on the Board of Distinction application. I have not read, but I've seen your submission on the first
Marnie and I are done.
item.
Yay.
Would you like to share what your topic was?
Our topic was the standard / benchmark. I don't remember exactly what it was, but something to the effect that the board will have a plan and will have a plan to execute the plan. And it was the year, I'm sure I'm not expressing that very well. But since this was the year that we developed a strategic plan for the first time in at least 2 decades, it kind of just flowed.
Yes,
So.
it was great. And we'd like to thank Marcel for also his
Oh, we
help.
did get some
and
support there,
support.
yes.
Awesome. Let's see. Anne and I have started the draft of the opportunity gap item. Had a very helpful meeting with Dr. Dana Bailey and Rich Mellish on that topic. So just last week, and started an outline. And so I'm halfway through a first draft on that one. I will pick it back up tomorrow as well. So we can get ready for submission. I think you've also started working on some of the data side. Director Moore?
Yes, I did. And
So just to be clear, our standard was set and communicate high expectations for student learning with clear goals and plans for meeting those expectations by adopting a collaboratively developed district plan focused on learning and achievement outcomes for all students.
Awesome.
We
So
sort of just spent the whole year doing
doing our
So,
strategic plan, which is
yes.
wonderful.
mhm.
I think my final item is I did send to each of you the survey to complete on our board self-assessment. I sent that to everyone.
Mhm.
So I want to say please and thank you. If you have done it, thank you. If you haven't done it yet, please,
Mhm.
if you'll complete that board assessment, self-assessment. And
And then I think we also have to do a little blurb on PD.
Mhm. Yeah, if you can go back and figure out what conferences, how many people attended which conferences. We have the ASU plus GSB that we didn't have in the past. WASDA regional meetings, legislative conference. What else? No, yeah, it's conferences. So NSBA, WASDA, ASU, GSB.
Annual conference.
Yeah.
General Assembly.
Oh, General Assembly, good one. We're pretty good at the whole PD thing.
okay, I'm trying to find. Oh, I can't find the due date I gave you guys.
Oh, it was August 31st for the self-assessment.
Self-assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not late yet.
We have 7 days.
But if you do that sooner, then we can get that data sooner, of which I would be grateful.
Yes.
Thank you. I did do mine as soon as I sent you the email, so I wouldn't be late to my own message. Is there any other topics that we want to talk about in calendaring section, Director Merle?
I just as an idea for us to consider at some point. So NSBA, we are currently NSBA affiliate, national affiliates. They do have another thing called the Center for Urban Boards of Education, and they're really working that it's less about urban, but it's more about basically kind of what happens when you have students that are have disproportionality based on several different factors. So it's more looking at what are some things that urban school districts struggle with, but we all do. And so I just wanted to put it, so it's called CUBE. Wanted to put it out there about whether or not that would be something we would want to be more involved in. They are having a conference in September. You may have gotten a mailer. You should have gotten a mailer with Ice-T on the front of it.
Ice-T and Cube, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be in Chicago. And so it's something that, I would say that people have been telling me that is the best conference that NSBA puts on. And something to consider. And again, I don't have the dates, but I know it's around the September 15th through the 17th type timeframe. This year it's in Chicago. Last year it was in Miami. So it's something that I think that, we might want to consider in future years, whether or not we would want to be involved in at least a CUBE conference, or whether or not people would want to be involved in becoming CUBE members as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything else? As you were saying that, I thought Ice-T, and I thought, what a weird reference for what you're saying, but he was on the material. Okay.
Well, because he's the keynote speaker.
Mhm.
So,
I thought I saw that.
and we're actually potentially getting Matthew McConaughey for Advocacy Institute. We'll see,
That's so interesting.
which is the same weekend as Day on the Hill in Washington State.
Oh, oh, damn. On the hill. Adding to my notes. Okay, if there's no other. Oh, please.
So we'll try for moving the SIPs up. We might move them up by a month, but that's great. So we'll work on that. That's one reminder in the calendaring section. And then we did not have an opportunity to meet with many members of the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce in June, as we were hoping to. The suggestion was we move to a one-to-one meeting strategy. So I was wondering, and because there were 3 companies that were interested in meeting with the school board: Recology, PSE, Puget Sound Energy, and Rowley Properties. And I was looking to ask if any board members would like to go on those. And if you're interested, to let me know. If you want to let me know now, then we can arrange those together. Or you can just let me know afterwards. All of them interested? Okay.
I don't know if did you talk about last time your outreach to same topic, Washington Institute? Am I saying?
Washington
Round
Round Table.
It might be good to just talk about that.
We're in conversation with their head of the Partnership for Learning, as well as had a conversation with the president and CEO of the Washington Roundtable. We're working on potentially a plan to bring them here to talk a bit about their policy agenda, in particular on behalf of their members, which are all the large companies based here in Washington State. So that's in progress and to be TBD. And we would work that through agenda planning and a meeting with a work study.
Perfect. Thank you. If no other